Hello and welcome to another edition of Press Row on Rivalry Family Media. I'm Todd Robbins. Happy to have you along with us and happy to be joined today on Press Row by Steve Kendall, Athletic Director of Ayer-Shirley's Regional School District, and taking some time out to talk about all things athletics at this very weird time in public education, but also in what has been a weird athletic year with the sheer number of things that athletics have been forced to endure throughout this last calendar year. So we'll have an opportunity to talk to Steve. Steve, thanks so much for joining us here today. And of course, I know that as athletic directors, you guys were all on one giant Zoom call in mid-watch last week. Some folks posted some pictures of you guys and what your screens looked like and how the discussions went. Give us a little kind of understanding of what those conversations were like. Where are people at with athletics, particularly in the mid-watch conference?
Right, so, the main focus was what we will be doing if there is a spring season. Talking about whether we're just going to do a league schedule, whether we support a 10 to 12 game schedule, whether at that point the tournament management committee had not made a recommendation regarding the tournament, what our thoughts were about that. And there's also just ways to kind of honor seniors, come up with ideas to honor seniors just in case things don't work out and we don't have a spring season. Because obviously those kids are the ones who are getting hurt probably the most. I mean, all the kids obviously are, but the seniors the most because there is no next year for them. This would be their last season. And I know for a lot of our student athletes who are three-sport athletes, this was the last season for them to do anything. And they've been a huge part of the athletic department. And I can tell you the one thing I kept hearing over and over at our athletic banquet every season is what great senior leadership we have this year from all sports, but I'll say particularly cross country and track where our senior leadership has been outstanding. But all the sports have been great. So for those kids to miss out on, everything, but they're all, graduation, prom, all those things, to miss out on their spring sports season, we're trying to find a way to, honor them and give them some recognition, not the recognition they deserve, because we certainly won't be able to do that if there's no season, but something to recognize their efforts to our schools. So a bunch of ideas were bandied about, and all of us are doing some form of senior recognition.
Of course, obviously, because we can't get the groups of people together, and maybe the likelihood of that happening wanes as the days and the numbers increase. What do you think? What's kind of the leading idea of how that might be able to achieve in a distanced environment?
It's one of the things that we're doing now, and I'm starting to accumulate. My track coach has actually started to do it before. Was like a senior bio. So what we're going to do is I've asked all my seniors to fill out a little bio sheet and send me some pictures and video, and then I'm going to put up on our webpage a little bit of a biography of each of our seniors. And then if we get back to school, even if it's just for, say we go back June 1st or whatever, we're back for 3 weeks, have it as a video that can run in the cafeteria on loop. There's some other ideas that we've come up with. That's the one that we're going to focus on at Ayer-Shirley, which we're going to do regardless. Like, we've started to do it. I'm starting to put it together. I've been getting information from the kids this week, starting the end of last week, and they've been very excited about it. Like I said, it's a great group of seniors we have at Ayer-Shirley, and they're remaining hopeful, but I think they're also realistic at the same time, and they're buying into what we're trying to do. And I know our track kids have been doing a great job of staying on the workouts, and those are obviously the first ones I heard back from because their coaches are in constant contact with them, because Mike Siegwin and Chris Donovan and Phil Moore, our track coaches, do a great job with our kids. And they've been, I think they've probably done more coaching now, one-on-one coaching with kids than they would have had we had a season had started, because they're giving one-on-one feedback based on runs that kids provide them, and basing workouts on how kids are doing. So they've been having a lot of one-on-one time, and they've done a great job. So I'm very pleased with the way our spring coaches have reacted to the situation, which could have been really bad. But they've done a nice job of staying connected with the kids, keeping the kids interested, keeping the kids moving, keeping the kids working out, keeping the kids working out on their own, and providing feedback to help them improve. And like we had a Zoom meeting with the kids last week, and one of the things I stressed was, whether or not we have a spring season doesn't mean that shouldn't affect whether you're exercising, because really that's going to be one of the number one things you do to keep your immune system up, but also your mental health up through all of this, because it's going to be a really challenging time for them. I mean, it's challenging for us as adults, but imagine being a 17, 18-year-old kid in your last 2 months of school, which you've been looking forward to celebrating for 12 years, and now it's kind of been taken away from you. So they're obviously going through I'm sure, all kinds of emotions. We want to try and support them however we can.
Absolutely. And there are so many things that will have to kind of be checked off along the way. And I know you, along with a lot of other athletic leadership and coaches on social media, have been doing everything you can to try to keep stoking that fire for, a spring season, assuming that things are able to turn around. As you guys were going through some of the discussions in the calls, what would you imagine, aside from, of course, figuring out the senior recognition piece, if sports were to restart, and the best scenarios play out, and May 4th, we're all able to return to public education and sports can begin as the MIAA hopes to allow it to have happen. What needs to happen between now and May 4th in order to make a spring 2020 season possible?
We're working on our schedules right now to get our schedules redone. I mean, that's the main thing, to get schedules redone so we can get it to the umpire assigners, who do a great job. I mean, I don't want to be in their shoes right now. They had assigned the whole season and then it got canceled, and they have to cancel everything, and they may have to reassign again for games that may never occur. But that's, the first priority is get those schedules done for all sports. And it's easier when you're in a great league like Midwatch, because we have schedulers who handle the league schedule for us, and then we go out and find our non-league games. But a sport like tennis, which we're just starting up this year, it's going to be a little more of a challenge for us because we're not in the league yet. We were originally planning on starting as a junior varsity program, but with no junior varsity programs in the area, we made the decision to go varsity year one. But it was too late to get on the league schedule because they'd already started, so we're not in the league. So I'm going to have to find some matches for them. And then obviously the other challenge really is going to be getting the fields ready, which seems like it should have plenty of time to do, but you also have to have the ability to get people out on the field. Now I'm pretty lucky. Our custodians are working pretty much every day through this. And our parks department, who does a lot of the work on our school field, our park department, Jeff Thomas, our rec director, does a lot of the work on our field. He is still working. So I believe he's been up there the last couple of days working on our field. So I think our field will be ready, but I know that could be a challenge for a lot of other schools, in that, their staff may not be necessarily working, or if they are, that's not a top priority. So with the parks department doing a lot of the work for us, and I can go up there and help them as well, he could be working on a softball field, I can be working on the baseball field, or vice versa. We can get things done a little more quickly than maybe some of the other schools where their custodians are taken off. I mean, I don't know how much my custodians will be able to help out, but I know I do have Jeff, and I know I have myself who can go out there and do a lot of the work if needed. So I think we'll be all set there, but certainly that's going to be a challenge for a lot of schools, especially, well, it's been a nice spring, of course, which one year we probably could have started on time, but that's going to be,
in some cases. It's been so nice. You might have been able to play exhibition games in March, which,
yeah.
What year that would be, right?
It's been at least, I obviously was coaching spring sports before I became AD, and I remember one year it was like 90 the first day, and then it snowed 3 days later. There's been very few years where we've been out on the field on day one. I think we could have been, and probably would have been, had this not occurred.
Which, of course, is how things break. And, of course, we're going to spend some time in our discussion today talking a lot about, the MIAA and where they fit into this. But it is important, I think, up front here to talk about how great the response from the MIAA as an association has been to this kind of pandemic scenario, where I don't know that if in public athletics or public education, I would say we didn't really have these kinds of plans standing by for what do you do when you can't go to school, and what do you do if you can't have sports. And I would say from a response standpoint, writing things on the fly, the Association of Administrators has gotten together with the MIAA and done everything they can to create an opportunity, including redefining the season now multiple times, to allow this to fit in before, of course, the end of the fiscal year on June 3rd.
Yeah, I mean, MIA gets beat up a lot. I've beat up on it a lot over the years as a reporter, as an athletic director, certainly. But they deserve a ton of credit for the way they've handled this. I think they've handled it extremely well. They could have gone and canceled the season, when they met a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, whenever the board of directors met. Time is just blending together for me at this point. But they didn't. They thought about it and said we can make this adjustment. And I like what they've done with the tournament idea, where teams can play up to June 11th. Teams that qualify the tournament will obviously keep playing. If you don't qualify the tournament, you certainly are welcome to continue to play games up until June 27th if you choose to. So they'd be they'd like the non-playoff football schedule, but I really like that idea, because when I first came up, I said if we have to choose between the two, I'd much prefer getting rid of the tournament and making it so everybody can play a maximum amount of games for all the kids. But I thought this was a great compromise by the tournament management committee, and then eventually the MIA board of directors who adopted it.
Yeah, without question, certainly. I think people love the idea of getting a maximum number of games in and being able to continue, even if they don't qualify for the tournament, to be able to continue to play games. So like you said, everybody gets somewhere between 10 and 15 games potentially in by the time they reach the deadline. I know I've talked to some coaches here, and they full well admitted they were not experts in how the legal and fiscal ramifications play into this. But I know some of them have, as Leominster Colin Davis had said to me with the lacrosse program, he'd be willing to coach in June, July, and August if the opportunity was presented to them. Is there any way, if the world turns a little bit, but maybe later on into the summer, is there any way to make that happen?
I don't know if they've brought that up yet, and I'm not sure. I mean, I'm certainly no expert on those areas either. But I think, I bet if I went to my coaches, they'd say the same thing. I mean, they'd love just to get these kids a season. I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, I think right now they're focused on, my guess is they've probably already talked about it on the board of directors behind closed doors, or at least emails, or just talking about other options of if this gets pushed back any further. But they're, obviously going to go on the guidance of what the governor says and move on from there. But I never say never to anything. I mean, it's certainly something to bring up, and if it's possible, I'm sure, based on how they've reacted so far, I'm sure if it is a possibility that they will be looking into it. Because I think, like I said, although I've beaten up the MIA countless times before, I think they've done a remarkably great job with this.
Yeah, I would fall into that same category, and I may do it before this interview is over. But on the front end, we will say yes. The presentation has been phenomenal thus far, and the reaction has been phenomenal. Assuming that we can extend beyond June 30th, and assuming that we cannot see public education resume in time by May 4th, is there any chance with a June 1st restart or something like that, is there any chance for a meaningful season to happen because of the amount of tryouts and pre-competition things that have to happen for those dominoes to fall in place for competition to happen? Is there any chance something can be squeezed in?
I can't see a meaningful season. Probably not. I think you could probably get in some crosstown rival games. Maybe we play like a Lunenburg and a Littleton, or play a double header against them, or like a jamboree style on a Saturday type thing. Get a few games in like that. But in terms of like getting a league schedule in and a tournament with 1 month, and 1 week of that has to be, preparation, probably not. But I think there could be things that could be done to still, if we're back in school in June, to still, get these kids a chance to play and a chance for them to be honored and get those last few senior days and get a home match in and honor the seniors.
I can certainly expect that in any way, shape, or form, any kind of athletic competition that happens from here on out, you're going to get the best of the best from student athletes and coaches and everybody else, regardless of whether it's 1 game or 20 games. People are just so itching, and so I think at this time, having the time to reflect on it, so appreciative of the opportunity that they have with athletics. They're looking forward to any level of competition they can get.
Absolutely. I know the kids I've spoken to are competing, missing being with their teammates. I think a lot of them understood this already, but like the ones who maybe didn't do now. And I think like all the extracurriculars that are offered at the school, I like to call them co-curriculars because they really do tie into what we're doing in our school. I know they did when I worked at Neshoba. I know they did when I worked at Leominster. These things all tie together, and it's all part of a bigger package. It's not just, the kids playing the sports, the kids who are able to come out and support their friends. It's the kids who come out and volunteer. I mean, I have tons of kids who come out and volunteer who don't play a sport at all, but they want to be part of something bigger. And, we have, the bands and the chorus and the drama programs and the clubs and our Best Buddies program, which we don't call Best Buddies, our unified program that we have. All those programs suffer from this, and those kids are all missing out on those opportunities in these last few months, and you want to be able to get them back and provide them. And I think everybody next year, when everything hopefully is back to normal, I think everybody will be a little more appreciative, hopefully long term, but at least for a season or two, or maybe a year, I think everybody will be a little more appreciative of everything that they have. I know I will be, and I think I know my coach as well because we've already had this conversation. So.
Without a doubt. Chad Garner, in an earlier interview, he promised he would give the officials and not argue with an umpire for at least a few innings. He was willing to go so far as to say he'd go a few innings before arguing.
I don't know if he's ever made more than a pitch or two. The umpires.
From the officiating side, I said, you're only as good as your last call. So, I had no, thoughts that it would last a long period of time by any stretch. Given the broad, kind of range of the uncertainty that we have obviously going on here, and how important, I think you mentioned the co-curricular piece, right? Athletics represents the secondary classroom. It's that next part of school that happens after the conclusion of the traditional 6-hour school day for so many kids. And I think for a lot of student athletes, and sometimes I think I sound like a broken record saying it, but it is the truth. If school maybe isn't your thing, athletics is a tremendous gateway to get the best out of kids in the Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. window, because they know they have that opportunity to go on to that secondary classroom and be a part of athletics. It's a great gateway to get kids invested in school as well.
Of course it is. I mean, you can look back over the years from when I worked at the Sentinel to when I worked at the Telegram to when I've worked at Neshoba, wherever. You have kids wherever you worked, and I've seen it, whether it was Fitchburg High, Leominster High, Monty Tech, Oakmont, Gardner, Neshoba, Ayer-Shirley. You have the kids who come to school and do the work they need to do so they can participate in athletics, or whatever the program it might be. It might be the band, it might be robotics, but those kids whose school, the traditional school necessarily isn't their thing, but they do what they need to do, and they're successful because they want to be successful in these extracurricular activities after school. And I think it's important. I think every school I've ever worked at understands the importance of these co-curriculars, but I hope people will see the importance of these programs. And I'm not just talking sports, because, sports are important, but there's so many other aspects to the school, that after school life that can be so beneficial for kids, whether it's student council or a cooking club, or, like I said, the best buddies program of some type, or band or robotics. Or even just volunteering with the athletic programs, being a scorekeeper, running the sidelines with a soccer ball, selling tickets on Friday night, or scorekeeping at a basketball game. There's so many opportunities for kids to get involved with their classmates and being part of that school culture, which I think is important, which it's difficult to build just in the school day, because there's just so much, the focus is on the learning aspect and not so much social, where I think these other programs add that social aspect as well. They have the learning, but they have the time and the ability to add that social aspect, which is so incredibly important at that age, for kids to be able to get that.
You've mentioned now a couple of times that Best Buddies type of program, and what is now being termed unified athletics was the term you used moments ago. And I think people have seen this cropping up. So I want to, while we're talking about it, I want to take a second and talk a little bit about that, because this has become kind of a whole new level of formalized activities within the athletic world, especially here in Central Massachusetts. We're seeing it and an outgrowth of it more and more and more. Talk a little bit about unified athletics and kind of what the overall goal is, and how you're seeing that growth. I know the student athletes, or what maybe previously would have been called like a Special Olympian athlete, to see some of the relationships that get built through these programs are absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be at Neshoba at the beginning when Pete McAuliffe over at Lunenburg kind of started the unified track here in Central Mass, and my son was part of the Neshoba program, so I was around that a lot, and saw the first years of that and the success that they had, and not just successful in that kids were doing well on the track. It's just the relationships that were developed. The people my son Cam worked with at Neshoba still to this day, and this is almost 10 years now, stay in touch with him and stay in touch with us, checking in on him. So track was going there for a while, and one of the first things I wanted to do when I got to Ayer-Shirley was to bring in a unified track. And we're not a big school, and our track team is huge, so I was trying to avoid taking kids away from other sports, which we were successful. We had about 10 to 12 kids, I believe. I think we had 12 kids last year from Ayer-Shirley, which would have been enough probably to have a nice small team. But I reached out to Dave Palazzi at Leominster and wanted to see if they were interested in joining with us. And we co-op last year, and it's a huge success. I mean, obviously they don't have a track, which makes it challenging to run not only a unified track program, but their traditional track program that they've been running without a track for I think since I graduated Leominster High School.
Seemingly forever.
Um, so to have them join us gave us even more numbers, and it really developed a nice relationship with our kids and their kids. So just for an example, I mean, I wasn't at every meet because obviously there were some road meets. I went to one road meet, but not the other. But I went to state championships and to the league championship. And my wife works at Leominster High. And one morning when I was stopping in to see her, I was going to visit Dave Palazzi as well. And some of the kids were coming out doing the recycling, and they all recognized me and came running over. And I had minimal, interaction with them during the season, but they knew exactly who I was. And, they were asking me questions about track. And this was back in probably October or so. This is the relationships that you can develop with the adults and the kids, with the kids and the culture changes. And this year we added unified bocce in the winter, which was great. It was just kind of a club program because not a lot of schools have it yet, but we wanted to get it going and then see if we can get other schools to do it next year. I know some challenges because even though I grew up in Leominster, I don't know much about bocce. And Nate Diffin, who is our athletic trainer, who also works in the school as a paraprofessional, he kind of ran the program, and we were kind of learning on the fly. And Lindsay Rocco Delichiai from Leominster, who's one of our phys ed teachers, she was able to fill us in on a lot of the rules to help us going. But that was great. We got about 15 kids in that. We had matches with the teachers and the staff and between each other, so that was fun. We added unified basketball this year, which was really a great program. We got a lot of kids involved in that. I think we had 15 kids involved, including a lot of the traditional basketball players who don't do much in the fall got involved, including some kids who, traditionally maybe got in a little bit of trouble at school. But I think this was a huge thing for them. The attitudes changed. I could see the way interacting with the other students really impacted them in a positive way. And, I just remember at one of the banquets we do, monthly banquets where we give out like Panther Awards for various things. One of our unified partners had won an award, and the first kid applauding for him was, a kid who, if you had asked me 6 months ago, would he ever be applauding for anyone at a awards banquet, I'd say no, but he was like right in the front row standing up cheering for him. So the impact it had on him, I think, was immense. And then we also added unified PE this year. We have a FLAC program in our building. They're not technically part of our school, but it has a lot of kids that, are in our building, and the kids don't often interact with them. So we were able to bring them into our unified PE class. And we have about 40 kids in there right now in that program, and the friendships that have been developed, and the walls that have been broken down in the cafeteria especially have been great. And to see the kids really buying into it and becoming friends, and which helps our unified club, our best buddies program as well in the long term, and just helps the school culture in general. So I think it's been a real positive addition to athletics in Central Mass. Central Mass has really been ahead of the curve, and I give Pete McAuliffe a ton of credit for that because he was really the one that got it going. But Tanya Rich and Neshoba and Jeff Rosinski at Marlboro have been real champions of it, as it's Eric Dolly at Oakmont, to really get other people involved and get a lot of other schools involved, which I think we've done a really nice job of. I think almost every school next year will have some form of unified basketball program and a unified track program of some type.
That's amazing, because I think sometimes we think about in the world of athletics, particularly at high school and college, we think about the athlete who excels, right? The one who is looking to perhaps turn this into something maybe a little bit more, or use it to catapult an educational opportunity somewhere beyond. And then of course you have those special athletes that are out there, those unified partners you were talking about. But it's that kid in between who's maybe looking for that social connection from athletics that it can provide. Or maybe, as you said, reach a student who perhaps would never have connected with athletics at all, and might have, changed his entire or her entire social emotional piece with school and with athletics that perhaps they never would have had through a unified program. I think maybe is an overlooked point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always say the impact. Everybody talks about what a great impact it is on the kids with special needs. I'm like, that's not the real impact. The real impact's on the other kids, the kids who get involved, the kids who maybe wouldn't have done something like this before and maybe not interacted with someone before, they become far more accepting of others, not just with intellectual disabilities, but of any difference. And I give credit to my PE teachers, Mark Justo and Lindsay Delici, Rocco, who have done an outstanding job of really taking an idea that I threw at them at the end of last year and running with it and really building it into something powerful. They've done a wonderful job with the unified PE program, and we're really pleased with how that's going and hoping to expand it again next year.
It's a very unique opportunity. Glad we had an opportunity to talk a little bit about that. And, one of the things that your student athlete handbook talks about, which I think was really great, that really jumped out at me, was the Panther way. How do you define the Panther way at Ayer-Shirley?
So it's the way we define it is, everybody can be a leader, and leadership means, helping others reach their goals. That's one of the big things that we focus on, and that we want to develop leaders in the community, not just now. It's great to have leaders in the school and these athletes to be leaders in the school, but give them the skills to help them become leaders in their community, wherever that is, whether it's Ayer-Shirley or Boston or somewhere in California or wherever. Become leaders in their community long term. Give them the skills where they can do that. And one of the ways we've gone about doing that is really stressing doing some type of community service with our teams every season, teaching sportsmanship skills, bring in the Positive Coaching Alliance to talk about ways to bring our teams closer together and building a positive culture. And again, I don't want to take credit for all these things. So certainly these are ideas that started when I worked as a hockey coach at Leominster, and Frank Stefanides was the athletic director there. I remember him having the athletic advisory council, one of the first people to do it. I basically just took it with me to Ayer-Shirley when I went there. It's one of the things I'm still using. I had Pete Richards as an AD at Neshoba first, and he was great at teaching me how to build that team culture. And then Tom O'Brien, who's now the AD at Haverhill, but he came in as the AD at Neshoba, and he taught me some things about building a culture and developing relationships with college coaches, because he came from the college ranks. And then of course I was under Tanya Rich, who's I think most people would say is probably the best athletic director in the state of Massachusetts. I had the opportunity to work under her and see the idea she had about building an athletic program, not just one that's successful on the field, but more importantly, one that's successful off the field, and developing community service ideas and developing those leadership skills that you want your athletes to have, and stressing those is the main thing. When I do my observations of coaches, my evaluation of coaches, we don't talk about wins and losses at all. Wins and losses to me are the least important thing. Would we like to win championships? Of course, we're thrilled when our track team does well and wins the state championship, and our hockey team made the state finals. But that doesn't mean we were just as proud of our football team, who went 1-9. But on our Pay It Forward 9/11 day, went down to the Shirley Center and served lunches and cleaned up the Shirley Senior Center of all the junk that was down in their basement, put it in trash receptacles, which Matrano trash removal donated, because of our football coach's connections and his drive to get kids to do these things. So they're out serving lunches and doing those things. I mean, they were winners in many ways. Just getting through their season with 7 freshmen starting on the field at the end of the season and 20 kids, but also the way they led off the field with so many young players too. I mean, those are the things that we look at with our teams. I mean, Pete Page, our basketball coach, does a great job of this. He builds a great culture, and he has his kids out helping out at Unlimited Basketball, which is a form of unified basketball, and shoveling snow in the years it snows at senior developments in Shirley and Ayer. So those things that our coaches do extremely well. Our cross-country coaches, they basically had them practice. They ran to different parts of the town and picked up trash. They ran trash bags and picked up trash in various areas of the 2 towns. So those types of activities are what we look at as the Panther way, the teaching those leadership skills and being someone who helps other people achieve their goals. And I think most of the kids that bought in, it's tough to get 100% of anybody to buy into anything, but we're getting close in a very short amount of time. And it's because, one, it's something that comes right down from our superintendent, Dr. Mary Malone, to our principal, Spencer Chrissy, to our assistant principal, Dr. Mary Meyer, to our coaches. Everybody knows the importance of this, and they know as important it is to be successful on the field. It's even more important to teach these kids the skills that they're going to need to be successful beyond high school. which is our big goal.
And I think establishing a spirit and a willingness, of course, to invest in that and buying into that overall message, it's not easy. I've seen athletic programs where it is very successful, and I've seen others where it's non-existent. It doesn't roll past the athletes, or even beyond that, the athletes don't even understand it. And I think those programs are in a much different place than programs that really do have both a spirit within their student athletes, and then it rolls into the student body in general and creates, I think, a much different vision and feeling for students and student athletes about their school and their schooling experience. Something more like when I look back on my time, you've mentioned your time as a student at Leominster, I look back on it in a positive way, and I try to translate that for some of my students today in another community, and they kind of look at me like I've got three heads, because they don't understand that spirit and that community piece sometimes.
Yeah, and it's difficult because a lot of times the kids who are at your school didn't grow up there, and their parents didn't grow up there, and they maybe just came there in 9th or 10th grade. I mean, I went through the Leominster school system from kindergarten through 12th grade, and someone brought this up the other day, and about favorite teachers, and I couldn't even pick. I had to pick like 12 because I had such outstanding teachers through Johnny Appleseed and Carter Junior High. That's how old I am. Carter Junior High and Leominster High School. I had great teachers, and I was very fortunate to have that. And people who gave their time after school and before school. I mean, I remember Malcolm McPherson being there before school at Carter. If we got there early, if we wanted to go play in the gym, we could go down there and play in the gym, whatever we wanted. Usually tried to say floor hockey, but any type of activity he was happy with. So those types of people went above and beyond for us, and that's what I think I'm very fortunate. I came in at the right time here, where one, I had coaches who do that and been able to hire ones to do that, but also, the last 2 years having just great seniors who are able to that bought in and lead the way. And once you've got through 2 or 3 years of that, those other kids don't know any other way. The freshmen and sophomores is what they know. So it took a little bit of time in the fall to get the freshmen to buy in, but I think the 9/11 day went really well. Pay it forward 9/11 day, where kids went out and did something. We didn't have total luck because I didn't think of this idea until I had read a book over the summer. So it wasn't like I was planning on not scheduling games on September 11th, but it just happened to work out that way. And every team dedicated part of their afternoon practice to, or all of their afternoon practice in some cases, to doing something for other people.
It's an incredible opportunity. I want to go over your core values. These are the other things that stood out to me. They were the 4 H's: hungry, healthy, humble, and honorable. If every athlete fell into those categories, I think we would be very lucky, and athletics would look very, very different across all of the kind of the picture of global athletics. But you say hungry, having a growth mindset, always believing there is room for improvement, and actually seeking feedback. Healthy, making choices that have a positive impact on our body, mind, spirit, and soul. Humble, never braggy or cocky, understanding that leadership means helping others achieve their goals as well. And honorable, respecting ourselves, our teammates, our opponents, officials, the fans, and the game. Talk a little bit about those core values.
Yeah, so the Athletic Advisory Council, a group of 16 students that were on that last year, and a couple coaches, we talked about what we wanted to do. We went through a whole process of talking about what was important to us. We broke into small groups. Well, first they did it individually, what they thought were the most important values. We talked about what core values were first, actually, but then we talked about what would be, for you, what would be most important. Then they broke into small groups, and they narrowed it down to like a list of 8. And then from there, we looked to see if we can combine any as a large group. And this one happened over the course of probably, we meet every other week, so it's probably about 6 meetings where we spent the chunk of time working on these. And these were the ones they came up with, which we did try to go for the same starting letter, which was kind of a suggestion by me, but also one of the kids. This kind of makes it easier to remember for kids, and they did a nice job with it. And they're the ones who really came up with the descriptions. I might have wordsmithed them a little bit, but for the most part, it was their wording, their ideas. Maybe they had a little bit of push from the coaches and us to go in a certain direction, but really it was minimal at best. I mean, those kids really did a great job of coming up with that. And I think it really, like you said, if we can get everybody, even if we can get 80% of these kids buying into these things, you're going to see a huge difference, not only in the success of your kids on the field or on the ice or on the court, but in the leadership you'll get as a school, and then the way the culture develops, especially in a small school. It's such an opportunity to to make change in a short amount of time in a school of 374 kids as opposed to Leominster has 1,800 kids. It's going to take a little bit longer time to make that type of change. But it's a real good opportunity. And that's what I stressed to them. Like, look, you guys can leave a real legacy here by making some positive changes in our athletic program. So, the year before I took over the program, our basketball team had to actually end its season early because they had, don't quote me on the number, but somewhere around 13 technicals through 16 games. And they made the decision to play the junior varsity team the last 2 games. And I don't blame anybody for this. The man who coached that team has coached other sports for us since then, has done a remarkable job and is a great coach. I think it was just a confluence of a lot of things happening at once. Principals were out. Yeah, the previous athletic director was out on leave. There wasn't a lot of people there to kind of support. Just had a group of kids who, for whatever reason, were oil and water with each other, and just things went awry quickly. We made one of the first things that was hire Eric Pauly, who had come out from Austin Prep to coach our team last year. Did a great job of really changing the culture of the program, which was not easy because there were 7 seniors on that team last year who had come, been there the previous year, and they were used to things being done a certain way. And Eric was able to start the changes before he, started a new business and was able to continue this year. And we were lucky to get Rick Kilpatrick in from Acton Boxborough. I mean, it was just complete luck and timing of that. We were able to get him. I saw his name pop up, and I'm like, coached at AB for 20 years. I wonder why I left. And Steve Dessy, who was the old Acton Boxborough AD, lives across the street from Ayer-Shirley High School. So I gave him a quick phone call and said, hey, what can you tell me about him? He goes, you'd be crazy not to hire him. And I know Steve Martin, the current AD, because he was the softball coach at Hudson for many years. And I gave him a call, and he said, if he walked in the door and wanted to coach back here again, we'd take him back. He left on his own. We didn't want him to leave. So we were very fortunate to grab him. So I've been very fortunate in the applicants I've received for coaches for our vacancies we've had, that we're able to get some real quality people in who have bought into what we want to do. And Rick certainly stepped right in and was above and beyond first year of what we could have ever expected him to accomplish on the court. Never mind the stuff he did off the court with the leadership. He did with a really young team this year, really only 3 seniors, and again, like the football team, 3 or 4 freshmen playing tons of minutes.
When you talk about small athletic program and small school, I didn't quite realize, and I've lived in Leominster my whole life, and I kind of knew Ayer-Shirley was on the smaller end. I thought it was similarly sized to Watertown, where I work, which is we run around 650 students, but 374 is a very small school and largely different from your previous athletic experiences. What struck you about going into a small school environment like that?
I think it was that opportunity I talked about, being able to make some positive changes in the athletic department. I know that, I talked to Tanya a number of times about the program. Obviously, she knew a lot about it, being the athletic director and knowing what was going on. I knew a little bit. I mean, I remember the Ayer-Shirley, I remember, was Ayer High School when the Morris brothers were there, and I was, going to scout games with my uncle Ken when he was coaching at Neshoba, as a little kid, charting plays and all that. So I remember going to see Jamie Morris and playing it. That's what I remember. A pretty big school at the time, and I had covered a game there a couple times, so I had a little bit of familiarity. But I knew it was pretty small, and I knew it was a pretty good opportunity to go in and help make some changes to make athletics something the school is proud of, but also something where the kids could experience something besides just being successful. I mean, our track team has been incredibly successful for years, and whatever I've brought in has just been a little bit of extra for them, because those guys do a great job. They were doing a great job before. They'll do a great job long after I'm probably gone, because I'm older than both the coaches, so I'll be retired long before they are. But I think the opportunity to come in and do some things, some leadership things, and work with coaches. I think a lot of the coaches were really great. I mean, it's always tough when you go in a new position and try to change things. And it wasn't drastic changes, but changes the way we do things, and the changes the way we looked at success, and changes to the way we work with our athletes. Well, what was most important to work with them? And there were just a lot of ways, and for a lot of coaches it was minor tweaks, and for other coaches it was big jumps, and everybody pretty much bought in right away, which was nice, because who knows what you're going to get when you walk into a new situation. I did get picked on a lot of times that we were now becoming the Neshoba East. Uh, but I said there's worse things to be than the athletic department at Neshoba Regional in terms of their not even just their success on the field, but the type of athletes and student athletes and leaders that we've turned out of the countless years I've been involved there. I mean, I was teaching there for 20 years, but I mean, like I said, my uncle Ken coached football there from the time I was like 10. So I've been involved in the sports since like the early 80s. Knowledgeable about it since then. So just the amount of people that came through there and watching how they did it, and even back then, Ken and Pete Richards, even back then when he was just coaching, the way they led kids and developed leaders and student athletes was something that really influenced me down the road.
Without a doubt, of course, with great mentors comes great opportunity. And I want to end this kind of section of the interview on this note. The end of your core value point says the following. It says, we expect our students to aspire to these values. We expect our staff to live these values. We expect our larger community to support these values. So it's more than just the athletes that are looking at these core values. You all really do want to reach not just your coaching staff. You want to break down the walls from the athletics department to the larger school and beyond the walls of the school into your community. You want everybody to follow these 4 H's.
Yes, and I'm very fortunate again in that our rec department people. We have Jeff Thomas and Ayer and Keith Began and Bill Manchester and Erica Crawford and Mark Pennard and Shirley. They don't have one rec director. They have a bunch of people who are involved in different sports. Have been really supportive of that as well. The youth programs are fantastic. They're always inviting our high school kids and coaches down to work with them. We have summer camps and summer clinics in virtually every sport we offer, basically run through the rec department. So it keeps the cost way down for kids, and we get a lot of enrollment in that, which helps our, in the long term will help our programs evolve. So, and the parents have been fantastic as well. I have no complaints about the way I've been treated, the way parents have reacted to things. Whenever I've received any type of feedback from parents, it's always been constructive. They almost always start with, this amazes me because it didn't happen in my past. An apology, I'm sorry to be bothering you with this. I know it's complaining. I'm like, no, this is a valid point, and I want feedback from people. I want to know how we're doing. And I think they're always surprised when it's like thank you is the first thing I usually say for sharing this stuff, because it's important to get, if we're not doing it right or not doing something the best we could, we want to know so we can change that and improve it and make it a better experience for everybody, including the parents. The parents obviously sacrifice a ton. And, as a coach early on, I think I don't think I understood the role of parents very well. And I think I understood, maybe I don't still, but I think I understand a lot better than I did. And if everyone ever go back to coaching, I think I'll be a far better coach from my experience as an athletic director than I was previously. I think I was a pretty good coach previously, certainly on the field and on the ice, but I think dealing with all aspects of it, I think I'd be far superior than I was even 2 years ago.
You wouldn't be the first athletic director to go back to coaching somewhere along the way if the opportunity presents itself. And Steve, of course, that perspective you have, having been both a long-term educator, coach, and now as an athletic director, brings me to kind of this next piece I want to talk about, which is kind of the state of Massachusetts athletics. The current pandemic aside, for the moment, you've spent enough time on the job now with your other experiences. How would you assess the state of high school athletics in Massachusetts in 2020?
It's an interesting one right now. It's definitely one of change. Between the move to National Federation of High School Rules and almost all sports, which for the most part, I think long-term will be good. But obviously short-term, it's really challenging for everybody. The football coaches and officials, I think it was a real challenge for everybody to make that switch this year. Even though we knew it was coming, it's still a challenge. I think we would have seen the same issues in baseball with some of the pitch counts, and maybe we still will in May and June. But making the adjustment there was less of an impact in volleyball, was more in the scorekeeping, which was more for me and my scorekeepers as we figured that out. Because I'll tell you right now that if you've never scored a volleyball match, it is by far the toughest match you can score, and toughest event to score. We were lucky that we were able to get an iPad program. We were able to put things together. There's my son Cam in the background. I'm sure. Um, okay. But those changes are obviously pretty major changes, and then there's the changes that are forthcoming in the future next fall, starting with the Max Preps rating system, um, which I think again long term will be good. A rating system of some type that's consistent across all sports. Short term will be challenging as we all figure out. Okay, what does strength of schedule mean? Does it mean you're playing playoff teams? Does it mean you're playing teams in higher divisions? When I understand it means you're playing playoff level teams. Because obviously playing it against bigger schools is great for me, but it's challenging to get, say, a Leominster who we played in softball and baseball last year to say, hey, yeah, we'll play you in baseball and softball because it's going to hurt us in our strength of schedule, but it won't if because we're perennially a playoff team in those sports. It'll actually help them. So figuring those things out will be interesting. I think we'll have a better idea after the fall. I think the mock ones they did for softball last year really helped me as a softball coach. I was able to look at it and say, okay, seeing the showbiz is still really good, which always was when I coached, because one of the things we always pride ourselves on is playing the best competition we could. And I was able to see how it affected our softball team, because one of the things that hurt us currently with the Walker system in softball is we're in Division II in softball, but our whole Midwatch League is Division III. Actually, Division II in softball, Division III, our league. And so all those teams, even though we're playing 4 teams that made the postseason, it hurt us to play like a Narragansett who made the district semis. It hurt us to play a Tohoto who was very good. Same in baseball. I mean, so it's interesting to see how those things will pan out. But I think overall that the rating system, the ranking system, and that will be good as long as we can. I'm hoping the strength of schedule stuff will be okay. I'm hoping that the score differential will be somehow weeded out. I think that's going to get weeded out eventually. And whether we stick with Max Preps long term or if it's a short term fix, who knows? I know they're going to reevaluate every couple of years to see how that is. And then of course there's the big one, which will start in the fall of 2021 with the statewide tournament, which is obviously a very controversial thing. I do like the district. I did vote for it, and I know I do like the district tournament format. What we knew as a district tournament format was no longer going to be, wasn't an option. So with that being off the table, and with schools like Leominster and Shrewsbury being forced out to Western Mass for a tournament, didn't really make sense to me as an athletic director. And it really put us selfishly, it put Ayer-Shirley into a position where we would finally be in a division, especially for our girls sports, where we would be at least with schools our size. We may not, we're still going to have to go through the likes of a Bromfield and Medway and those types of schools that are much bigger than us, but same size, usually much better than us, but they're same size. Millis in girls basketball, which we're bigger than, but they're a powerhouse in girls basketball. But now we're not. Last year, they talked about the road trips again. Road trips, people have to take the bus trips. Our last 3 bus trips were to Northbridge, Whitensville Christian, which is Northbridge because it's right next door, and Leicester. So it's not like those were short road trips for us. In our non-playoff football game last year was at Quabog, which was like a 2-hour ride at 5 o'clock on a Friday. So to me, it wasn't going to affect our travel that much. And the reality is this, and I had this argument with Mr. Sweeney a couple of times, who I love, and he's one of our JV coaches, but we definitely differ on this one, is that the odds of taking 3 long road trips are slim, because with the ranking system, the higher seed is generally going to win. And the odds are going to like the New York border to the Cape 3 times in a tournament are pretty slim. I'm sure it's going to happen the first year out just because it is so slim, and that's been one of the big arguments against it. But I think overall, like I said, I think long term it'll be good for the state. Short term, it's tough. It's a change. It's a big change. And the district tournaments have been great. I mean, I won district championships as a coach and as a player, and those are important. But they were losing their luster when your Central Mass final is Natick versus Franklin. That's not really a Central Mass final.
No, and I appreciated your point on Twitter. I thought that was the correct point, where athletic directors were faced with 2 choices. You were faced with adopting a new system that, although a significant change, might bring about its own kind of new air that might inject some new energy into the idea, or accept more of an east to central, central to west shift, which, as you were just chronicling, is not the ideal. It's not the current tournament format that we have. When I could say when Leominster got sent out to be part of Western Mass basketball, it made absolutely no sense whatsoever. And from a standpoint of burden sharing, basically there was a limited number of schools that were having to now, take on that burden of the shift in order to make numbers work. Whereas now with the statewide tournament, everybody has to share that burden a little bit, where somebody in Eastern Mass may get sent to Western Mass. Somebody in Western Mass may get sent to, the far southeast region of Central Mass. Like, they're going to all have to share in this change a little bit, as opposed to Central and Western Mass being the one who's always stuck kind of having to take on that burden.
Yeah, and I mean, and it will create some more excitement. You get the 32 teams in and guaranteed in, and then other teams that will get into the 500 rule. That'll be good. I think there's going to be some other, we've talked about doing, 18 game schedule and then going to a league tournament. So like a Big East, we do a mid-watch tournament where you can play an additional couple games before you get to a state tournament. So teams that didn't even qualify for the state tournament still can get some more games in. So, I mean, none of this is definite yet, but things that are being bandied about that could be long-term good. And again, I don't know that either system was perfect, but I think that was the better of the two choices on the table at the time. And it doesn't mean it's going to stay this way. I think there's going to be things that are going to come up, and they're going to have to get ironed out, and we'll figure it out as we go along, as you have to with everything. So.
No question about that. And that was kind of the piece that I was thinking with the statewide tournament, is that you're right. What we knew as the statewide sectional tournament was gone. This year we called a sectional basketball championship for Central Mass. That was St. John's of Shrewsbury on the one hand, but their opposition was Franklin, which you would not traditionally have considered a Central Mass team.
And it's great when you end up with a St. John's versus Shrewsbury game, or a Leominster versus Fitchburg, or even Leominster versus St. John's or Wachusett. I mean, those are great games, and WPI is packed. That's great. There's no reason it can't be packed if they still use that venue, though. I mean, there's no reason that we could end up with a Leominster St. John's state final or a Fitchburg Leominster state final. Imagine how that could be if that ever happened.
I don't know
without. I don't know what happens. I think they might be in different divisions, but.
Still, I agree with your point. I think the other thing that coaches have been expressing from a concern standpoint with this, outside of the max preps, which I think you did a great job of chronicling the point over, is the recognition that a district championship received. And I know one of the ideas that has been played about and that I know was presented at the Central Mass meeting was the idea essentially of recognition of Elite Eight or Final Four status, which would amount to the same thing. There would still be banners, there would still be trophy recognition. Just the same way at the NCAA, there are regional trophies awarded. The same concept would happen.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea. And I think, that recognition that teams get is important. Like I said, I've been a part of district championships at all levels as a coach and as a player, and then as an athletic director. And I know the kids take a lot of pride in that. So I think it's important to try and maintain some connection to those. And I think the Final Four and the Elite Eight help with that. If you get that far, you deserve something. I mean, that's in your division. That means you've won a couple games against some pretty good competition against everybody in your division. So I think that's good that they've proposed that. And I hope I'm pretty sure it'll be adopted.
When we think about the state of course, Massachusetts high school athletics, these were just some of the examples that I, kind of observed this year on just different broadcasts we were out, covering, or different stories that were presented by other media outlets out there. You had things like the Triple E scenario from this past fall. You had schools leveraging those scenarios to force games to be played, say, on a Friday afternoon when they easily could have been moved to a Saturday, thus having to force the opposition school to have to pull their kids from classes earlier in order to get them to go to games. And of course, to cover long commutes, as some of you kind of pointed out, some forcing time limits. The football mercy rule this year that was enacted through the Federation, because Massachusetts didn't add some of the state modifications that, say, Alabama and others did. Teams that were leading could call a timeout and stand there for 2 minutes while the timeout was carried out, while that time came off of the board, which certainly created a strange ending to, certain football games. One game that we were in this year, the fourth quarter ran, I believe it was about 5 minutes in total. The entire fourth quarter clock expired in a term of 5 minutes of playing action. Very strange. And of course, from a standpoint of player safety, which is always the paramount thing. Anytime you modify a game so significantly that it's basically playing half speed or not being played to its fullest extent, that is actually, in my opinion, more dangerous than playing the game out, which was kind of the whole idea of what a mercy rule was enacted for in the first place. And then the last piece I think that we've seen is inexperience, whether it be game officials, which we all know is going to be a problem. If it isn't right now, it's going to only become worse as those people retire, that we have inexperienced game officials that are having to run or not enough officials to spread around in order to do the high level games. And so you have officials that are rushing competitions, trying to start games earlier, trying to move them faster than maybe they should. All of these things just lead up to me to put athletics into a really tough scenario, which is, are we at some points just running athletics for the sake of saying that we have them, if we are going to not go through and caretake them the way that they ultimately need to be?
Yeah, then there's another one too. Is we forgot about the wet bulb globe thermometer which was the big thing at the beginning of the summer, which went away quickly. But that did force. There were a couple of times where soccer officials, especially because they're usually doing games all over the place. We got a 3:30 game, and we're going to take a 10-minute break in the middle of it, which we figured out quickly that if we just did a second, like a quarter break at the soccer games, we were able to do this. You play 20 minutes. You take a water break for 5 minutes, and you play another 20 minutes. You get to halftime, another 20 minutes, water break. You're able to follow within the rules and not extend the game too much. But those officials who are trying to get from a 3:30 game that's going to end about 5:15 to another school that's having a night game at 7 o'clock that's 40 minutes away, that's a challenge for them because there's not enough officials. So the official drought is certainly an issue. And I coached softball for years, as you know, because you umpire, and because you umpire, there's a lot of guys who are going to be retiring probably sooner rather than later. And that's going to be a real problem for that sport when that happens. I may have to start umpiring softball at that point. I don't know. We'll see.
It certainly would be needed and welcomed at that point in time. In some ways, I think people, when they look at the MIAA, maybe they stare at it as a strange structure in some fashion. And I mean that in this way. I think people envision it as a legislative body, much the same way Congress or a parliament is, where things are put forward. And of course, everybody votes, in theory, in the best interest of the overall sport, right? Yeah. But in reality, it's a lot more of a confederation, right? It's a bunch of individual school partners that all come together like a United Nations that organize together and all have self-interested reasons for why they would choose certain things. Does self-interest sometimes make getting the best possible aspect for sports difficult from a standpoint of athletic administration?
Oh, absolutely, because you have to do a balance of what's best for your school. I mean, I always look at it this way. My first allegiance is to my school and my athletes. The second one's to the Midwest League. And the third is to Central Mass. And the fourth is the state. So I have to look at things when we're looking at any issue. What's best for my school? But I also want to try and what's best for our league as a total. What's best for our Central Mass as a district. What's best for the state of Massachusetts. And you have to do your best to balance that. And it's hard when you know that sometimes what you're going to choose might not be the exact best. It'll be still okay for your kids and still okay for your coaches, but you don't know that it's the best option, but you know it's best for the league, or if you know it's best for Central Mass. So it's tough because obviously, your school district pays your salary, whoever it is, whether it's me, whether it's Tanya, whether it's, Can Fisk, whether it's, Mike Lynn, whoever it is, like we're all paid by our school district, and we have to do what's best for our school district. So you have to kind of balance off that with, to me, it's always what's best for the rest of the teams in my league and the teams I compete against, with that balance of the two and see what's usually, and almost always we're very lucky because I think our league is big enough where and sometimes it's a challenge, but I think most of the time we're able to divide things up so it's pretty equitable for everybody.
In some way.
Good group of athletic directors too, and coaches in our league that we're very fortunate to work together.
Without a doubt. I think there are some things that we've seen that you don't of course want to see in athletics. And I go back to a quote I posted when I saw this story. It was the South Shore Voc West Bridgewater controversy, where two schools decided ultimately, because they couldn't administratively figure it out, they just eliminated the game. They just refused to play one another. And the ultimate loser there were the 60 plus students that would have gotten to play the game. The adults couldn't get together and figure out how to make this athletic event happen. So I go back to the quote from a great childhood movie, Little Big League, and of course, Baseball Hall of Famer Bob Lemon, who said, of course, sports, essentially taking a little liberty here, were made for kids, and grown-ups only screw it up. If the grown-ups create a scenario where a game can't happen, and thus athletes are told, no, there's no game to play, that's a really dangerous precedent that likely never should have gotten that far.
No, that's the football system is not the best with the non-playoff system, and even with the Thanksgiving Day games 2 years ago with the cold weather and the snow and everything else. It's such a challenge to try. We played on Thanksgiving, and it was not great, but the kids got to play. If I had to do it over again, there were many things I would do over it. I had my notebook of things, what to do if it snows or if it's cold, or how our field reacts to certain things. And hopefully next time it does that, we're playing at little things. It makes life a lot easier when you're playing on a turf field to make that decision. But I think most people, and I'm going to stress most, try to do what's best for the kids. I try to make every decision I make based on what's best for the student athletes. I'm not a student athlete anymore, so sometimes I'm wrong. So I really do like to bounce ideas off kids before I make decisions, even with the state tournament idea and even with the seasons, the 8 to 12 game season. I had a Zoom with my kids and asked them, what are your thoughts? This is not my decision. Like, I'll be the one who votes, and I'm the one who have to say, but I want to hear what you guys have to say, because at the end of the day, this is you. Do you want to have a state tournament? Do you want to just play, do you want to play the most games possible? Let me know. I want to get that feedback. So I think most people do that, but you're right, not everybody. There are some people who they're bigger than the game, unfortunately.
Building coalition and finding, of course, a willing partner to do what's best for the student athletes, so vital with the way these systems work. Steve, before I let you go and have one little bit of fun here to wrap things up, I've been doing this with coaches and athletic directors as I've been talking to them about this new statewide tournament concept. And of course, this would be in any sport hypothetical. I just picked a bunch of random towns and matched them up against one another. In this case, Ayer-Shirley. But tell me, do these kind of feed your excitement? Do they fit your fancy? An Ayer-Shirley versus a Watertown. Ayer-Shirley versus Orleans out on the Cape. Ayer-Shirley versus Lee out on the New York border. Do those excite you the way Ayer-Shirley, Littleton, Maynard, or Tohoto would in your everyday athletic competition?
Probably not. Lee's great. I love the town of Lee. I do like it out there. And Watertown, I used to play it. When I coached hockey in the show, we played Watertown. So to me, it's interesting. I mean, it's certainly interesting. Playing Littleton is a lot of fun for us. It's right next door. I like Mike Lynn a lot, the athletic director. I love their coaches. So that's a tough one. Maynard, I've known Kevin Caruso, the principal / athletic director, since we're both student council advisors at our various schools. So obviously those are long-term, rivalries, but does it excite me as much as or more than the Ayer-Shirley Leicester game? Probably, or Whitensville Christian, although we had two really good. I had to go to Whitensville Christian twice, back-to-back days this fall. Both are, I don't know how it happened, but both our soccer teams end up 11th seed, and both their soccer teams end up a 6th seed. So we got to go to Whitensville Christian back-to-back days, which is not a short ride from Ayer or anywhere in North County. So yeah, maybe not our traditional rivals, but some of those other teams that we've played in the postseason. Probably as exciting or more exciting because there'll be a playoff game, but yeah, certainly not. We had a game at Bromfield this year in the girls basketball playoffs, and it's tough to match that. Being the kids right next door, we had a packed house, packed gym. I mean, that's tough to match. And hopefully we'll have more games at Bromfield because they're the exact same size as us, and we're in the same division. So hopefully we'll see a bunch of them in the postseason.
Perhaps get each other on your regular season schedules as well. Steve Kendall, Athletic Director of Ayer-Shirley Regional School District. Thank you so much for joining us here on Press Row. We'll leave our conversation there, but we will definitely have you back in the coming weeks and months and years ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for all of you, we thank you so very much for joining us on this edition of Press Row here on Rivalry Family Media. Like, subscribe, and you can get these episodes right to your social media device information right there on your screen. For all of us at Rivalry Family Media, we thank you so very much for being a part of our family. Until next time, I am Todd Robbins. So long, everybody.